guys, and welcome to another episode of Informed Society. Today I'm going to be talking about borderline personality disorder through a series of 4 different chapters, along with other accompanying personality disorders that can and will be meshed in with borderline personality disorder if certain behavior patterns are not addressed earlier on.
People who struggle with various cluster B personality disorders, such as borderline personality disorder and coexisting disorders like narcissism, antisocial personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder, they will lie, falsify truths, and make up stories to cover their dirty tracks. They are self-serving individuals. Brave, honest people that have become victims of their abuse will stand up for themselves and others by telling the truth in sharing valuable information through observation and educating oneself. They take what they've learned to educate and protect themselves, family, and friends from further manipulation and abuse. These individuals care about others by not allowing the abuse to continue. That is the sole purpose of this entire series, focused mainly on borderline personality disorder, along with other accompanying disorders mentioned earlier in the summary.
I'm going to start with a few quotes to kind of get us all warmed up and get us in the right mindset here. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you understand, the easier it will be to see from others' perspective and help those in need. When you really listen to another person from their point of view and reflect back to them that understanding, it's like giving them emotional oxygen. That quote comes from Stephen Covey. The opposite can be said for those who aren't willing to listen or believe what the person is saying when wrong has been done to them. It makes them feel re-victimized all over again. Throughout this discussion, I will be referring to certain individuals as the abuser and target victims in order to maintain anonymity out of respect and confidentiality purposes. I will also be referring to those with mental chemical disorders, impulsive erratic behaviors, compulsive lying, and unrealistic thoughts as part of the personality disorders they struggle with, and not about them as the person. I want to be clear on that. Most personality disorders are treatable only if the individual recognizes and acknowledges they have a problem and seek the help they need as long as they need until further overall improvement becomes more consistent in their day-to-day life. This is one of the most misunderstood and dangerous disorders because it can be confused with co-occurring disorders that can be traceable alongside it as well, depending on the spectrum level of BPD they are on, either high functioning or low functioning or both. Let's start off by getting familiar with the symptoms and causes of someone with borderline personality disorder, or BPD for short. As long as you have witnessed someone being abused or have been abused by someone with these symptoms, you should be able to recognize them fairly quick. Keep in mind, some of the behaviors need to be persistent anywhere between frequently to occasionally through a fairly long period of time, even without the influence of alcohol or drugs present in their system. Also, biological and environmental factors also play a key role in one developing BPD. There are 9 specific diagnostic criteria symptoms for borderline personality disorder defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, that was published in 2013 by the American Psychiatric Association. In order to be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, you must meet 5 of the 9 criteria. Has a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships, self-image and effects, and marked impulsivity beginning by early adulthood and present in a variety of contexts, as indicated by 5 or more of the following. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Here's an example. This can include them taking on the mindset of "I'll get them before they get me" attitude, while building up walls and attacking the person or people in private, or through a social media smear campaign filled with lies, cover-ups, and deception, without considering who they're hurting, while only thinking others are out to expose their weaknesses or deepest personal things they told them in private. By the time the abuser with BPD has already done the damage, the target victims have no choice but to either defend themselves or walk away and not play their twisted drama games. The first instinct most people have that become the targets are to defend themselves for their own protection. As walking away and ignoring may raise some eyebrows to closed-minded and ignorant individuals that will believe anything the abuser says. Walking away, not saying anything, avoidance, can seem as a form of lying by omission, especially to those who are quick to judge and unwilling to see and understand from both perspectives. That is why some people feel it is absolutely necessary to speak up and tell the truth. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything, right? Also remember, those who have nothing to hide, hide nothing. If those accusers are still attacking with false accusations, then they are clearly the ones choosing to be ignorant, not you. Then it's time to walk away after you have defended yourself. No one should have to waste their time explaining themselves to a child who is refusing to listen while plugging their ears. The narcissist spectrum of the BPD kicks into high gear during attempts to try and save their reputation while doing their best to convince others how they are the victim. In reality, the person with BPD is throwing out all kinds of lies and contradictions about the person or people they are targeting, whom are the true victims against their prior, present, and future careless words, actions, and behavior. People that struggle with BPD do this out of fear, anger, and resentment. Fear of not being accepted and written off by people they once felt were close friends or family in their own mind. The reason for this is because of early childhood trauma through financial problems, environmental conditions, parents splitting up, or different kinds of mental, emotional, or physical abuse or neglect they went through. Oftentimes, extended relatives and friends may have no idea what their family communication style is like aside from family or group peer gatherings, unless some relatives or friends were there to witness different situations firsthand. The reason for this is because of feelings of shame and embarrassment of being judged or ridiculed for the conditions they live in, so they don't speak up. Here is another symptom. Has a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. Here are some examples of that. Say when you first meet or talk over the phone with a person struggling with BPD that you're unaware of struggling with, the BPD individual confidently starts telling you very personal things about themselves on the first and second phone call and or meeting in person when you just barely met, or after a long period of time of not being in contact before the internet and long before social media form of communication was available at their fingertips. A lot of catching up to do, sure, but one with common sense would know there are limits of how much you tell someone you haven't seen in a long time or never met before. Not for the person struggling with BPD though. They are too eager to build relationships fast because they are emotionally empty inside and they need a quick fix to give themselves temporary relief, but at the cost of their targets, which typically are those who know how to show compassion, empathy, and sympathy. They will also be too eager to build relationships too quickly as a means to try and make up for any time they feel they have lost from other previous relationships in their life that went sour in hopes to heal their wounds quicker. They usually will miss one important step to healing. They forget that emotional healing is done within first, while they are doing without. You cannot expect other people to heal your pain like a caring, concerned parent would kiss their child's cut or scrape, then put a band-aid on it. Sorry, emotional pain takes more time and energy to heal from than a quick fix that is only temporary and superficial. Oftentimes, those struggling with BPD are very forward and personal in conversation right away, which causes discomfort for those unaware or unprepared for what they are about to witness and hear. Most people with normal cognitive thought process typically take things slower in order to get to know others to see if they are trustworthy. Once the person struggling with BPD senses the other person is backing away with an uncomfortable disposition for all the BPD's dirty laundry being dumped on them all at once, the person with BPD will think they don't approve of them and are judging them. So they will immediately start calling them selfish and uncaring, along with other horrible accusations, as a defense mechanism from past pain they have not dealt with in a healthy, proper manner. You are not their therapist or best friend that they feel they could tell you anything. Do not trust someone you barely know that is eager to get everything out on the table right away, then offers the same undivided attention and listening in return. Once they think or feel you're not going to confide in them or trust them, they will go back on their word of what they said earlier about being a good listener and understanding a lot, followed up with false accusations and personal attacks on you that really reflect their personal problems, not yours. The person with BPD simply is not capable of reciprocating most anything to others because they are on an endless cycle of feelings of worthlessness, hate, and shame for themselves, so they are not at an emotional or mental state to help others or even understand where others are coming from. They will only put up a temporary mask, like everything is okay, in order to get initial approval from others, so they can start their emotional draining abuse cycle all over again. That is the narcissistic spectrum side of it they are dealing with by lying by omission in order to get what they want out of people. Here's another symptom. There's identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self. Here are some examples. Thoughts and feelings of wanting to fit in with others, perhaps because they never thought or felt they could fit in with others in their childhood. Age and gender difference among relatives and neighborhood friends could have played a role in those thoughts or feelings, especially when the only being willing to offer unconditional love and attention to them is the family dog or cat, while the older siblings and cousins hang out together, ignoring the younger, annoying, attention-seeking sibling or relative. Feeling different from an early age entirely due to going through massive multiple seizures, which usually disrupts normal healthy process of the frontal lobe and other parts of the brain that develops logical reasoning and emotions. Later in adulthood, some may more frequently than others change their appearance and hairstyle, color, makeup, jewelry, fashion sense in order to temporarily feel good about themselves, or to try and impress others for attention, or to somehow feel a part of the cool group. Histrionic personality disorder carries this similar behavior as well, and people with BPD have been known to also display traits and qualities of histrionic disorder. Research studies suggest that 60% of the risk of developing borderline personality disorder occurs through genetic abnormalities. These abnormalities affect proper functioning of brain circuits connected to the behavioral and emotional processing, impulse control, and cognitive activities such as logic and perception. Early childhood seizures and or massive head trauma can most definitely contribute towards this. Environmental and biological factors can weigh in heavily too. Genes that increase risk for the disorder may be passed on by people who have the disorder itself, or a related disorder such as bipolar disorder, depression, substance abuse disorders, ADHD, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Those with BPD are also more prone to develop certain other mental disorders, such as mood disorders, major depressive disorders, dysthymia, bipolar disorder, substance abuse disorders, anxiety and panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, eating disorders, bulimia, anorexia nervosa, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and other personality disorders, such as histrionic, antisocial personality disorder, narcissism. Of all environmental factors that place a person at risk for developing borderline disorder, those associated with poor or uninformed parenting appear to be most critical. These include early separation from one or both parents, repeated emotional, physical, or sexual abuse by someone within or outside of the family itself, and inconsistent, unsupportive care. It is important to understand that children who have not been exposed to such environmental traumas can still develop borderline disorder. This means some people with biological risk of developing the disorder is very high and may be sufficient enough. such as head trauma, seizures, chemical disorders in the brain. Now here's another symptom. Impulsivity in at least two areas that are potentially self-damaging. Spending, sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. Here are some examples. Although stealing wasn't in that list, I'm sure kleptomania and continued stealing, even after being caught and fined by the judge with community service, can be included in that list, as long as it's something done on impulse and premeditated, which is damaging to their conscience and others' hard-earned money. Self-professing binge drinker on weekends to get drunk at parties or drinking away the pain, overindulging in marijuana or cigarettes at any given moment, even in the presence of their pets, getting them sick from the potent smoke inhalation inside small living quarters. That's a form of animal abuse that can be tied to antisocial personality disorder spectrum of BPD. It is absolutely true. Some people, including animals, can get very nauseous from different amounts of marijuana use, depending on the individual. It is especially dangerous for dogs and cats because their smelling senses are 10 to 20 times more sensitive than humans. It takes a lot of ignorance and negligence for anyone to smoke out their pets, or even children if they have them, indoors until they are throwing up. Experimenting with hard illegal drugs and experimenting in sexual acts with their same-sex friends when they are not in a healthy monogamous relationship with their typical choice of opposite gender. Vehicular hit and run, speeding and other traffic violations, aside from binge eating, not eating for long periods of time due to their own personal hysteria-induced anxiety that has nothing to do with anyone else but their own disorders they refuse to seek help for. Here's another symptom. Recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, or threats of self-mutilating behavior. Here's an example. This typically resides mainly with those struggling with more of the lower functioning spectrum of borderline personality disorder. Although not eating or claiming to not eat or very little for a week or more, while blaming it on their anxiety and paranoia from events out of their control, causing them hysteria, is a cry out for help and attention. That is nothing to blink at and should be taken seriously, unless the person with BPD has cried wolf one too many times and nothing happened. Higher functioning BPD spectrum individuals know they are smarter than to try and take their own life because they value themselves and their welfare above others. Sometimes they will lie and play the victim to pretend to be in pain for attention and personal gain. Once again, that is the narcissistic spectrum of BPD talking. It can be tricky knowing the difference between someone with higher functioning BPD and lower functioning BPD, especially if they cry wolf one too many times. That's when encouraging them to seek professional therapy should be considered. There's another symptom. They'll have affective instability due to a marked reactivity of mood, such as intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. Here are some examples. Making assumptions with unrealistic thoughts that others are out to get them, which they conjured up in their own mind, that doesn't reflect in the words or actions of others they attempt to target, while playing the imaginary victim. Another symptom is chronic feelings of emptiness. Here's an example. They will alienate friends and family because of their abusive behavior while having something to complain about daily or weekly, while relying mostly on their pets for companionship. That's evident enough. Another symptom would be inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. Here are some examples. Getting in frequent arguments, disagreements with complete strangers or familiar people, friends or family, while belittling them and discounting any of their views, standards, logical reasoning, and judgment and morals. Trying to tear others down in order to try to make them feel shame and humiliation because they are angry and bitter, and because they have a difficult time feeling happy about a lot of things for themselves. They don't want to see others happy and joyful for the things they wish they could be happy about. If they can't have that joy, no one can kind of attitude. That's also part of antisocial personality disorder. Happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions. That was from the Dalai Lama. Here's another symptom: transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. In the midst of over-the-top self-induced anxiety through obsessive-compulsive thoughts, one with BPD can throw themselves in a manic panic attack, not thinking rationally about others' words, actions, and good intentions, because they have developed over time a lack of trust in others. Sometimes they confuse timelines, people, and events that took place of past experiences with people and events they are or were currently trying to get acquainted or reacquainted with. That can be frustrating for the person with BPD, but especially frustrating for the healthy-minded individuals that knows their own history. BPD individuals confuse events, time period, and people, typically when red button words or topics are brought up by either party, depending on how new and how severe their past situations were with someone else. Just because the other person is unaware that the BPD struggling individual is still suffering from PTSD from their past relationships with others, that does not make them a bad person. It just means they were not aware of their circumstances because the person with BPD wasn't very clear about either the severity or recent history of the problems. There's also a good chance they have not fully got over past issues of their own because they never learned how to heal properly from their past events with some guidance through therapy and counseling. A lot of disharmony and miscommunication on the BPD's behalf will occasionally spill over to family, relatives, and friends that they are or were previously in contact with. Confusion, stress, mental and emotional exhaustion, depression, anxiety, and sometimes PTSD can happen to family and friends from the BPD abuse because they may not know how to deal with such abuse they never encountered before. Oftentimes, family and friends are not aware of or even considered the multiple chemical, biological, and environmental contributing factors and choices the person with BPD made and has gone through over long periods of time, unless they were aware of them and remember and took mental notes about different events and family dynamics that took place. Oftentimes, family and friends have not been thoroughly educated in the matter of what causes BPD and how it can get worse with time, if not looked at closely and put in check once the abuse starts from the person with BPD. That is why I decided to thoroughly investigate and research the multiple ongoing symptoms and behavior patterns of this kind of abuse, so that others can be well aware of the warning signs to steer clear of anyone they may come across that displays such behavior, keeping in mind they must meet 5 of the 9 symptoms in the criteria. Even if they don't, and there's consistent, persistent abuse in one area or another, sometimes you just need to cut your losses and just go no contact with them. Those who have more empathic personality qualities should especially be aware and stay as far away as possible from people with borderline and narcissism, because their choice targets usually are those who are more willing to listen and with caring, empathic, and sympathetic mind and heart. They prey upon these individuals for their own emotional fuel until they have drained them of anything they have. Then they move on to their next target victims. They are emotional vampires that use people as disposable objects to help them thrive. So that's it for borderline personality disorder explained. And our next chapter is going to be when, where, and how borderline personality disorder begins. And there's going to be a lot of interesting and important details there that you'll want to pay especially close attention to. So you'll probably want to go to that one next before you jump ahead to any others. Okay? Well, thanks for watching. Maybe we can learn more from each other by sharing experiences. So thanks for watching again, and stay tuned for more.